Smitty is our guest, James Smitty Smith from In This Corner TV, on the 40th anniversary of the Thrilla in Manila. This is how we care about boxing, and 99.7% of the shows didn't mention this today, and we want it to be a priority because, Smitty, I think on the short list of the top 10 greatest moments of all time in all sports combined, and boxing is the oldest and one of the most famous, is this boxing's greatest moment when it comes to the biggest stage and the biggest event?
Yeah, I like, these two guys, Ali and Frazier, over a 4-year period, put in 41 of the most brilliant rounds in the history of prize fighting. I think Ali Frazier won March 8, 1971, was the greatest sporting event ever. But this final chapter of this historical trilogy really represented and illustrated, JT, who and what these two men and fighters are and were inside and outside of the squared circle. They were, in fact, as men and fighters, the total antithesis of each other. Ali and Frazier, they painted their lives and careers on completely opposite canvases, but in the end, these two great warriors needed each other, were in fact, in my opinion, made for each other to bring out the best in one another, two diametrically opposed men and fighters made for, and in my opinion, created the ultimate fistic drama. In this last fight, this Thrilla in Manila 40 years ago today, the ferocity and savagery at which, the fight was fought at times, despite their skill, made it so special, and it hasn't been duplicated because these two were special guys and special fighters, and it was a special day.
Yeah, when you talk about the savagery of this fight, the first fight, as you talked about, in 1971, Frazier was the champion, unanimous decision, but 15 rounds, absolutely brutal. They had to wait till January of 74 for the rematch, and neither, as you know, were champions. But what happened to Frazier before by George Foreman a year earlier, people were questioning Frazier before the Thrilla in Manila. How was Frazier able to get up physically for this fight? And again, the brutal savagery of it, both of these fighters could have died in the ring.
Because of one name, Muhammad Ali. Joe told me in what turned out to be the final interview that he ever did on television in summer of 2011 that, that really, in a sense, after March 8, 1971, he really felt, in fact, JT, that he had accomplished everything. He put everything into that fight. He never was the same. Neither was Ali. Neither guy. It's not like a football game where, Brady against the Seahawks and they had a rough game. No, this is totally different. You don't play boxing. Neither guy was the same. In fact, you said something there leading up. Most people, if they went even one round with either one of these guys, they'd never be the same physically or mentally, and a lot of people would simply get killed. I mean, so you can imagine these two fought each other 3 times, but they brought out the best in one another because of that old adage, and this one exemplifies it better than anything: styles make fights. But in this one, because of all the stuff that went on outside the ring with the animosity that Joe carried, I guarantee it, into the grave in Philadelphia, that's what made it, so something kind of different and something kind of special.
Reminiscing about Ali Frazier with James Smitty Smith from InThisCornerTV.com on Fox Sports Radio. And a couple other ingredients in this soup, Smitty, is that there were people who were against Vietnam and people who were for Vietnam. And somehow the liberals ended up being for Ali and the conservatives for Joe somehow, even though Joe was rather apolitical. But somehow that's the way it seemed to break down. Even back then, even though now we break things down like that all the time in America, they did too for that first fight, and it carried through to the second and third. Another great ingredient. And when JT mentioned could have fought to their death, wasn't Joe Frazier in the hospital 2 weeks after the first fight?
There was even a report after the first fight that Joe had died.
Right.
There were several things that went, maybe even some radio reports or some AP reports that he had died. He was, in fact, in the hospital for a couple of weeks and dehydration, and Ali had all, he didn't have a broken jaw, but he was, urinating blood and what have you. But you brought out something that, I'm going to do something on this if I ever can take time for my show and everything else. People don't understand that going into that first fight, white America absolutely hated Ali.
Right.
And black America turned on Joe, who was the deep-rooted Southern guy from South Carolina, born in Beaufort, South Carolina. Ali somehow spun it that he was the Uncle Tom, which, of course, Joe never forgave him for. And yet, after the fight, because Ali handled the defeat with some dignity, I ain't so pretty anymore, is what he said the next day, is that public sentiment would change. I remember my mother coming home from the cocktail lounge that she worked at. She had to come home early because she threw out a customer who called. There was a picture of me up there on the wall at the cocktail thing, and somebody called, "Who's your son next to the N-word?" And my mother, I guess, attacked the guy she was serving. It's amazing how public sentiment, would turn around, and even the two, because when I last interviewed Ali on radio in 1985, he admitted to me that he lost the first fight, which for years he claimed he won, and that Joe Frazier was, in fact, without question, the greatest warrior he's ever seen in his life. Joe took it to the grave, though, I really believe. Even though he said some kind things about Ali on my show, I think he took it to the grave.
Smitty's our guest. I told everybody, especially the youngsters out there, to go to YouTube and watch this. It's over several million views, and you can break it down into rounds or categories or the whole fight on YouTube. What about closed circuit back then and the people, the time change, those who had to stay up, those who were waiting around radio for the outcome of this fight? If this fight was today, I mean, Floyd had the biggest fight of all time with Manny Pacquiao pay-per-view wise, but back then it didn't cost that much for closed circuit. How difficult was it for the great fight fans to watch this fight live?
And that's what made, this fight, and of course the first one, so special, was that we didn't have social media. There was no Twitter. There was no Facebook. There was no Instagram. There was no, even cable and stuff, and a satellite. So the fact that these two could capture the imagination of the world, that the IRA would take a little break from fighting, that people would stop bombing, that that a place like the Philippines would bring Ali over for really political reasons. And, of course, Zaire nearly bankrupted themselves to have the fight with George Foreman. It really made it so special. And you can imagine what this type of fight, Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao, they've done but can you imagine if Ali and Frazier were around today with what we have?
Yes.
Shows like yours are some of the I was really disappointed on ESPN today. I didn't watch it all damn day, but I didn't hear about this fight, and I was really disappointed.
This is a landmark day in boxing history, the 40th anniversary of the Thrilla in Manila. Maybe the greatest heavyweight, the most brutal and savage heavyweight fight at the global stage, still to this day. One more quick one, Smitty, before Looney jumps in on the 15 rounds. I know a lot. Look at Ali, look at Frazier, look at boxers today who suffered by fighting 15 rounds, but the difference between the 12th all the way to the 15th decided some of the greatest heavyweight fights of all time.
Especially between these two guys.
Walcott and Marciano, Jersey Joe Walcott and Marciano, that first fight, it would have gone to Walcott. Joe Louis and Billy Conn would have gone to Billy Conn, their first fight. I mean, I could go on. Leonard and Hearns, their first fight. Tommy Hearns wins a decision. If it ends in 12 rounds, it goes to 4. It was a 15-rounder, and Ray stopped him in the 14th. Every great fighter that I've ever interviewed from the past that thinks that they should go back to 15 rounds. I've gotten in trouble calling fights before with my broadcast partners, and they'd say, call it the championship rounds, and I refuse to do it these days because there are no championship rounds. They're gone. 13, 14, and 15 are gone.
How well said. And, if you took away rounds 13, 14, and 15 from Ali Frazier 1 and Ali Frazier 3, you've ruined the fight.
You ruined boxing. No, you ruined boxing. If you took it away from those two fights, 13, 14, and 15, it takes away from the history of the sport and what the sport meant and about the endurance and fighting late in fights.
Perhaps the most famous. Perhaps the most famous left hook ever thrown, Smitty, was that 15th round Joe Frazier left hook on Muhammad Ali.
Yeah, Frazier calls it that, where he went back home to his southern roots.
Yeah.
He kind of hit it low and then brought it up high, and Ali went down and told me that he was unconscious, and when he hit the ground, he woke back up, he popped back up, he was able to survive the round. And then in their last fight, the one we're talking about, October the 1st, 1975, Eddie Futch, one of my favorite people in the history of boxing, maybe the greatest trainer ever, certainly on the short list. He stopped that fight, much to the anger of Joe Frazier. But Muhammad Ali, many people said to me, Angelo didn't say it, Angelo Dundee, but a lot of people told me that were close, that Ali wasn't coming out for the 15th round.
Ali was not going to come out for the 15th round, and when he looked over in shock that Frazier and the fight was over, Ali slumped his shoulders, could barely get up off the stool, could barely walk out of the ring. That's a great story, Smitty, about how Ali was taken to the brink of death in this fight and is still what we consider the greatest fighter of all time.
A little bit different than Mayweather and Pacquiao, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think so.
Perfect way to wrap it up. Perfect way to wrap that up. Smitty, thanks for coming on, man. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for sharing the moments, guys.
Yeah, we'll always will. That's Smitty in thiscornertv.com. That's a really important point he made at the end. Mayweather, at the end of every fight, typically mismatches because he's really good, does everything not to fight. He just boxes. Ali and Frazier almost died in the ring. Put that out for everybody to see. Entertainment value, warriors. You can say Floyd doesn't need to do that. He can make hundreds of millions without getting hurt. I agree with that. But Floyd never had the ability to entertain the way Ali Frazier did. They almost died to entertain us. Floyd will never do that. Maybe he doesn't have to.